Hello there, welcome to VLGA Connect, your weekly look at what's happening around the local government sector in Victoria, brought to you by the VLGA and sponsored by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. I'll have some of the latest happenings in Connect News for you in just a moment. And joining me today will be the Mayor of Whittlesea, Councillor Lawrie Cox. We'll talk about his council's stand on road conditions and a call for the state government to step up and do more to manage its assets. And we'll meet the Mayor of East Gippsland, Councillor Jodie Ashworth, to talk about her leadership journey and check in on some of the current issues and challenges there in that eastern corner of the state. That's all just ahead. Hope you can stay with us for VLGA Connect. It is time for Connect News. A mayoral stalemate on the Mornington Peninsula, a Frankston sleep-out to shine a light on homelessness, and council workers preparing to strike across Melbourne's suburbs. All of that and more just ahead in this week's Connect News. A meeting to elect the new mayor of Mornington Peninsula Shire has ended in a stalemate. Both nominated candidates, Acting Mayor Paul Pinjarro and Councillor Stephen Batty, attracted exactly 5 votes each from the 10 councillors present. A 20-minute adjournment failed to break the deadlock, and a second vote returned the same result. Another attempt will be made on the 16th of June. Councillor Pinjarro will continue as acting mayor in the meantime. And of course, this has all been brought about by the resignation of Councillor Anthony Marsh, who was recently elected to State Parliament. Ararat Rural City Council CEO Dr Tim Harrison has announced his resignation after more than 8 years at the helm. He'll finish up on the 30th of November. Mayor Bob Sanders acknowledged his strong legacy, including record capital works investment and a significant financial turnaround. He said recruitment will begin soon for a replacement and operations will continue without disruption. Glenelg Shire Council has a new councillor following a countback. Mary Picard was officially sworn in this week. Mayor Karen Stevens welcomed Councillor Picard, highlighting her community ties, experience and passion for the region. That vacancy arose after the dramatic resignation of Councillor Mike Noski during budget deliberations in April. Loddon Shire Council has reappointed its Chief Executive Lincoln Fitzgerald to a new 5-year contract, taking effect from the 1st of November. Mayor Dan Straub praised Mr Fitzgerald's strong leadership through the 2022 and 23 floods and said the extension puts the council in a strong position as it develops its next council plan. The Mayor and CEO of Frankston City Council will sleep rough this month to draw attention to a 4-year high in local homelessness. May figures show 59 people are sleeping without shelter in Frankston every night. Mayor Sue Baker and CEO Tennille Bradley are using the sleep out to call for a $2.5 million state government funding injection over 4 years to expand local outreach teams and strengthen the Frankston and Mornington Peninsula Zero project. Northern Grampians CEO Brent McAllister has also signed up for the sleep out, which is taking place later this month. More than 1,500 Victorian council workers are preparing for a second round of industrial action as enterprise bargaining talks continue to stall. The ASU has scheduled a 24-hour stop work for June 17, affecting 8 councils: Melbourne, Darebin, Hume, Merribeck, Yarra, Maribyrnong, Hobsons Bay and Greater Dandenong. Residents can expect disruptions to bin collections, library services and road maintenance. Monash Council has announced it will phase out its delivery of in-home aged care services by the end of June next year. That follows the major national aged care reforms designed to give older Australians greater choice through specialist providers. Mayor Stuart James said the council is not best placed to deliver services at the scale now required under the new national framework. Northern Grampians Shire Council says the newly declared Western Renewable Energy Zone is smaller than initially proposed, but still not what the council would prefer. The zone combines 2 earlier REZ proposals, with its eastern section falling entirely within the Shire. The council says some culturally significant and high biodiversity areas have been removed, but that prime agricultural land remains included. Households in Loddon Shire are facing a 15% rise in waste collection charges driven by fuel and supply pressures on the council's curbside contract. An extra $192,000 has been allocated in next year's budget to cover the higher costs. And finally, a story of remarkable resilience. Maribyrnong City Council Mayor Mohammed Semra has been profiled by the ABC's Australian Story. The program documents his journey from arriving in Australia as a Sudanese refugee overcoming a debilitating stutter to becoming a city mayor at just 27 years of age. It's an extraordinary story of determination, and it's well worth a watch. That's the latest from VLGA Connect News. For more of what's happening across the nation in the sector, listen to the Local Government News Roundup podcast, sponsored by the VLGA and available wherever you listen to podcasts. Well, roads, one of the most basic things that residents expect governments to get right. And in Melbourne's rapidly growing outer north, the city of Whittlesea says the state government is falling dangerously behind. The council has just released a damning audit that shows more than 1,300 defects on state-managed arterial roads across the municipality, with only 42 of nearly 750 originally identified faults having been fixed before hundreds more emerged. To unpack this a little and talk about the situation on the ground, if you'll excuse the pun, I've got the Mayor of the City of Whittlesea with me, Councillor Lawrie Cox, first-time visitor to VLGA Connect. Hello, Lawrie, good to have you here.
Morning, Chris. How you doing?
Going very well, thank you. Nice to see you. And how's the mayoralty fitting? You, of course, were a councillor prior to the administration period. You're back in the new council. How's it all feeling to you at the moment?
I'm a bit of an old councillor, Chris. I go back to 1979 in the
Yeah,
Shire days. So I spent a bit of time there and as Shire president, but came back in the 2016. So it was a fairly tumultuous period in that. And of course, we were dismissed in 2020. But again, it was a fine line. But there was a challenge at the start of this term. But I'm quite enjoying the role. I think the major challenge has been trying to keep Whittlesea out of the headlines. Is that
yeah,
possible?
yeah.
Um,
Well,
um,
I'd have to say in the first 12 months that was probably a big fail, but at the moment things seem to be more on an even keel.
we're working together. It's difficult with a new council. There's only one other councillor now on count now there that has served. My previous colleague, Steve Kosmeski, of course, was lost the by-election result, which was no fault of his.
Yeah,
But we are now dealing with a group of councillors that are still, some cases, trying to come to grips with the role.
yeah, yeah. Fair enough. And look, just quickly before we get on to roads, what's the most significant difference you think about being a councillor now, as say when you were back there first in 1979?
Look, I have to say, without doubt, I was a volunteer. We didn't get paid.
Yeah,
And I've got to tell you, that was probably the best time to be a councillor because you got in there, you were involved in the community, you didn't have this issue about being paid an allowance or anything like that, and it was fun.
yeah,
It was challenging, it was hard work, but it was fun.
yeah.
Now you've got to go through a raft of legislation, a raft of challenges, the induction processes. And look, it does scare people.
Mm,
That's really what I say.
mm.
I understand the regulatory requirements, but people don't necessarily understand the responsibilities. And look, as a board, I've been a board director for 34 years in superannuation funds and things like that and sports. And it's really a challenge to be strategic rather than operational. A lot of
Yeah.
councils love to get in there and think that they're going to fix everything, but they've got to work through the process. So educating people as to how to work with the administration and how to work respectfully with staff has been somewhat of a challenge over the years, I found.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head for one of the key issues there, and it's certainly a more complex environment than it ever was. But let's look at the scale of this roads issue. Your council commissioned audits of, I think it was 206 kilometres or thereabouts of state managed roads between October last year and early this year. And when you went back to check on the original 749 defects, there were 707 still outstanding, and another 553 new ones had appeared. These are big numbers. Are we talking about a safety issue here or just an inconvenience for road users?
Look, it's a mixture. Certainly, there's a big safety issue, and I really it was about trying to provide evidence because quite often councillors, will whine about issues, and state members will turn off and say, "Oh, it's just council having another whinge." Um, what we tried to do with the audit was actually put on paper and pictures. It's
Yeah.
going back to basics. We'd almost get the crayons out if we have to. Um,
Provide some hard, fast evidence.
Correct. And
Yeah.
and show what's been going on and the lack of maintenance. And it was a challenge to us. And in the former council, we actually used to do the contract. So we were doing the maintenance probably every 6 to 8 weeks. The department changed its view, went to a contractor. We're lucky to get a cut once every uh, 12 months in some cases, but the safety barriers have been breaking down. Trucks are hitting them. They put up a red cone, zip tie it to it, and say, "Oh, that's fixed. That's safe." No, it's not.
Yeah.
We've got trees growing up in front of barriers, not behind barriers.
Yeah.
And we've got obviously dump rubbish issues. So they're all major things. But we really wanted to show the evidence, and that's what the original report was about, and that was what the updated report's about.
I think there were always concerns about whether DTP, the Department of Transport and Planning, were truly resourced enough to be able to take on these responsibilities, to take them back. It seems like those fears have been realised.
Look, I think we all suspected that and knew that. To some extent, we've been trying to negotiate the process through that. Look, as recently as last week, DTP came out and said, "Oh, we're going to do a blitz on your roads. We're going to clean it up and everything." If they do that, that's fine. I'm happy to go out and do a report and show this is what they've done. And we just haven't got the evidence of that.
Yeah.
So, from our point of view, we're saying the community is very loudly saying to us, enough is enough. It's the potholes, it's the damage to the barriers, it's the risks, it's the stuff laying all over the roads, it's dead wildlife. And these are roads are maintained by state government, not council, but the council, of course, gets the blame for it.
Yeah, yeah, an age-old problem, and I noticed that you've suggested to residents that they take their concerns directly to the government, not necessarily bring them to council. I guess one of the challenges is identifying whose responsibility a particular piece of road is.
That's the case, and we have the maps, and look, we've been negotiating for years to change some of the responsibilities on roads. We're saying to the state, more than happy for us to take back responsibility on some of these roads. And we're not perfect. I'm not saying that we're the best people that can deliver this, but we're in a better position to actually identify and provide the work on it.
Those maps, are they publicly available? Have you got something perhaps on your website? I know some councils are doing this now, so people can actually see who is responsible for this particular road that's of concern.
We have, I'm not sure if I can't recall whether it's on the website, but certainly as part of the report, we actually identified the roads
Right.
and,
Okay, that's
and
good.
put that picture there. But the report's actively available on the website.
Good place to start. Let's talk about Donnybrook Road. You've made a statement about this recently as well. A separate, but I guess related sort of problem, not neglected maintenance, but infrastructure here that really was never built to keep up with the growth. This road was designed for around 20,000 trips a day, and it's already carrying more than 37,000. And recent upgrade announcements don't extend into the city of Whittlesea. So, what are you looking to happen here and when?
Um, Obviously, as soon as possible. It's like everything in the growth area. Unfortunately, our infrastructure is lagging, and that's been the case over many years and over successive governments. Um, Donnybrook Estates, the activations of each of the estates feeding back into Donnybrook Road rather than probably east-west across the backs is the problem. Feeding into one access point going to the Hume Freeway in the city of Hume and Mariang Road, Epping Road to the east, which is our area. The most recent statements, and we congratulate the state, don't get me wrong, we're not totally criticising. Both state and federal have been acting, building the extra bridge over the Hume Freeway, duplicating into Dwyer Street, but Dwyer Street's still within the city of Hume. And our estates around Donnybrook Springs and across, feeding back into Epping Road, are still back on those single tracks. And that's not good enough. That, as you say, the traffic load is just far too heavy for that capacity. And we want to see those roads to the east actually fast-tracked and developed and made sure that the people have got access. And the point to this is public transport's not readily available in these areas. So it's car-dependent estates. So people are both work, school, hospitals, and there's been plenty of examples of emergencies trying to get out through peak hour traffic, and it's just a disaster.
Yeah, look, it's the age-old thing, isn't it? The growth is outpacing the infrastructure. The public transport, as you say, isn't there. But I sort of put to you, Lawrie, that Whittlesea's not alone here. Other growth councils right around the fringe of Melbourne have got similar problems. I guess it's a tough battle to get heard when everyone's crying for the same level of attention.
It is, but I think a lot of people have sort of said, I mean, I've had to cop some criticism. They're saying, oh, Whittlesea's finally recognised. Well, Whittlesea hasn't just finally recognised. We've been doing the advocacy over a long period of time, but quite clearly, we've said enough's enough as a council. Our residents are basically over it. The North, and I chair the Northern Council Alliance of Mitchell and Hume and uh, Whittlesea, Nillumbik. All of these roads capacity, as you say, around the Ring of Melbourne in the growth areas are absolutely necessary and crying out for a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, yeah, certainly are. And of course, it is a state election year, so hopefully some of these issues will bubble up and get some level of priority in the announcements that you hear coming from the major candidates in the months ahead.
Well, from our point of view, as a council, we'll continue to advocate both with government, opposition, and any of the crossbenchers at any stage. We are trying to point out these are the things that need to be fixed. But I'm also saying it quite clearly from the North. The
Yeah,
North is saying we've actually had enough. We
yeah,
we need to get these things fixed. I mean, a lot of exercises going over in the West and a lot down the South, and they're not things that we're seeing any benefit of in the North. And I mean, yeah, we do get things out of state government and out of federal government. We get that, but we do need to have the priority focus on how people get around our municipality.
yeah. You have to keep trying, don't you?
Yep.
Before I let you go, Lawrie, your CEO's moved on. Craig Lloyd's headed across to Western Australia. You've got a big task ahead of you as a council to appoint a new CEO. Do you see that happening this calendar year?
Yes, I do.
Yep.
The process is underway already. A lot of people were a little bit surprised. I mean, we were in the process of renegotiating a new contract with Craig, and Craig decided to move on, so we respect that. But yeah, it's a challenge like anything that councils do, but we are a large growth council. We have a lot of challenges and a lot of work, and we look forward to taking on board a new and a fresh approach coming
Yeah.
forward. I want to do that as quickly as possible because I want things settled down. And as I said, my task as an older councillor is to make sure Whittlesea is operating in a stable environment. That was the reason I came back. Was I really wanted the IP to make sure that we had a stable environment for our community, for our staff, and basically the council.
Yeah, look, a change of CEO is very unsettling on an organisation, notwithstanding the size of yours. What do you say to potential candidates, Lawrie, that look at the recent history and say, oh, this council's been through a commission of inquiry, it's come out of a period of administration. Perhaps it's not a council I want to further my career at this point in time. What do you say to those people?
Uh, Give us a chance. Look, I think, and I was asked this the other day as well. A lot of people say, yeah, there was challenges, and you look back in our recent history, we had a few CEOs and we had a few problems. The majority of those councils are gone out of the picture. I think we've got a very stable group at the moment. They've just got to get their understanding of the process and the role, but it's certainly nowhere near as divisive as it was. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think there is a challenge there, and I think I look forward to working with a new CEO. And I certainly encourage people to have a good hard look at us. As I said, we're a fantastic council, size-wise, income-wise, structure-wise. We've got some challenges being a growth council, but I really think that we're a great council.
Thanks for the open and frank response to that, Lawrie. Best of luck with that task. One of the most important decisions the council will make in its life cycle. And I appreciate you coming on VLGA Connect this week.
Thank you very much for the time, Chris.
That's Lawrie Cox, the Mayor of the City of Whittlesea. Well, East Gippsland Shire is one of Victoria's largest and most diverse shires, stretching from the snowy mountains to the coast. It's got so many wonderful natural elements, some of which we're about to see. Jodie Ashworth is a Paynesville local, first elected as a councillor in 2024 and chosen by her fellow councillors as mayor in November last year. And I'm very pleased to say Jodie's joining me now on VLGA Connect. Councillor Ashworth, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for the invitation to have me on today. It's great to be here.
Lovely to have you here. And your background, for those watching on YouTube, it's just the magnificent view of Lakes Entrance, which is awe-inspiring. You must feel so lucky to have that in your
I'm,
shire.
I feel very lucky to live in East Gippsland and have beautiful places like that
Yeah,
in our region.
lovely. So you were first elected, as I said, in 2024, and within a year, elevated to the mayoralty. It's pretty steep and rapid climb. How do you feel about that when you look back like 2 years ago? Did you imagine to be sitting where you are now?
Well, no, I didn't. But actually, 3 years ago, when I got a place in the Women Leading Locally program, that was my first, I guess, exposure to local government. And it was a great space to be in terms of having that mentoring around me
Yeah.
and provided for me. And I've met lots of wonderful people in that space and still continue those friendships and those networks today. And VLGA Connect was one of those first things that I did look into and start listening to a year, probably 18 months out before election. So
Oh, terrific.
uh, great to get insights early on before actually running for election and then ultimately ending up in this chair.
Excellent. So I hope that was of some use in building your sector knowledge. What drew you to putting your hand up in the first place and participating in that Women Leading Locally program?
So, in business and in capacity of volunteering for community organisations, I'd always been in leadership and part of, a regional community. And so, really, my interest was in finding out a little bit more about that, which ultimately led to local government. And it's that place where you get to have a seat at the table um, and really get into the nitty gritty of what goes on in the local shire and what goes on in your community. So that was primarily my interest.
Mm.
Did I ever think that I'd actually be elected and be the mayor? No, but
Mm.
I'm really, it's a real privilege to sit in the chair and it's a really great experience to be able to serve community.
Yeah, it just shows you never know where you might go if you put yourself out there. And I did notice when you accepted the mayoralty last year, you did so with quite determination and a clear commitment to serve. Now that you're several months into the role, what surprised you most, perhaps, about what the job involves day to day?
Well, it's definitely more than the roads, rates, and rubbish, which I think a lot of people hear about in community. And obviously, when you're going through an election time, that's what people hear. But ultimately, when you get to be that councillor that sits around the table, it is a whole lot more than
Mm.
that.
Mm.
Um, and from a community perspective, we are that local connection to government and we're the one that's most easily accessible, I guess, for people. But it's certainly an interesting and complex place to be in, I guess, local government, but then in any form of government, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
Have you had any issues around the council table since you've been in charge, for want of a better expression, as mayor, that perhaps have challenged the way you've looked at things in the past?
I think we've got a great group of councillors and we're all from very diverse backgrounds, which when it's a democracy, that's what you want around the table. And so, but for me, it's always coming back to the space of, we are all elected representatives of our community, and community is what is, important, and community matters. So we need to be listening to community.
Yeah. You mentioned it's not all roads, rates, and rubbish, but roads is a big issue. We've just been talking to Lawrie Cox in Whittlesea on the show today about roads issues there in the north of Melbourne, where the growth is really outpacing the infrastructure. But you've got similar issues, perhaps not the population growth, but certainly the infrastructure needs and the road maintenance needs that many others have, perhaps on a bigger scale.
We do, Chris. We have over 3,000 kilometres of council owned and managed roads.
Mm.
So that's a really big area to be looking after. And, last week listening to someone at Glen Ira, they're
Mm.
talking about 39 kilometres of road.
Yeah.
In a regional space, over 3,000 kilometres it's it's a huge amount of space, and it's a really large road network that
Mm.
does require maintenance and it does require investment to be looked after.
And the natural disasters that we've been having don't help there, do they? So, what have you seen in terms of having to make decisions about putting money towards those council managed roads that perhaps wouldn't go to other projects that you'd also dearly love to see funded?
And we'd like we would love to see lots of projects funded, but, road infrastructure is really important in East Gippsland. It's the connectivity between towns and communities. We need it for freight, we need it for tourism. So it's a priority. And, if we're talking about keeping people safe, then, that's obviously that's really important for community. Yeah.
Talking about keeping people safe, I wanted to talk to you about your airport. This sort of got on my radar recently when the government announced a bailout for a lot of council-funded airports that were impacted by the Rex Airlines collapse. You're not one of those airports. I don't think you've had Rex there, but you've got a very important airport that serves medically, I think the second busiest in the state.
Second busiest in the state. So,
Yeah.
For us, it's a big asset, but it's a very important asset because for community in East Gippsland, it could be the difference between life and death. And I know that sounds dramatic, but that's the reality. We, by road, we're 4 hours from Melbourne. And in an emergency, we need those planes here to transport people to Melbourne.
And emergencies like fires as well. It really came to the fore there, didn't it?
Absolutely. So during those bushfires to 2019 and 20, the airport was an important place to be, and important in emergency situations. Absolutely.
Do you receive government support for the running of that airport?
We don't receive a lot of funding for that. And so, that is one of the challenges, I guess. It's the operations of the airport and it's the upgrades of the airport. So, we need that sustainable funding.
You put out a fairly pointed media statement after the May state budget saying that it largely missed East Gippsland. While you welcome some of those elements, you called for that $1 billion regional fund that others supported, and it fell well short of that. How frustrated do you feel about this year's budget?
I feel really frustrated. And while I welcome any support heading to East Gippsland, I'd certainly like to see more. We did get an amount of funding to go towards Lakes Entrance CFA for the design of that. It wasn't for the build. But that's, CFA's been there where they are for about 90 years now. So, it's due an upgrade. We'd certainly agree with that $1 billion ask for the funding as well. But yeah, so my role as mayor is to advocate for funding to East Gippsland, and we'll certainly be doing that in the lead up to the state election this year.
Yeah, so just on that, what will you be pushing candidates mostly if you were able to get, say, three things achieved from this state election campaign? What would they be?
It'd definitely be roads, and it'd be infrastructure for housing growth. We've got a target of 11,000 new homes by 2050. So, we need a lot of infrastructure support for that. And the other one would be healthcare. We have an ageing population here. Bairnsdale is our main hospital, but that also needs upgrading and some more facilities for the emergency department.
Mm.
So they're our three key priorities coming up to election.
And you've also joined the campaign opposing the rollout of the fourth glass bin, which is meant to be in by next year. You've called that a waste of money. Do you have any great hope that you're going to be heard on that issue?
We're hoping so. So, we've mentioned that East Gippsland is a vast area, and so the cost of the rollout for us and the glass bin initially will be around the $3 million mark, and that's prior to, so those sort of cost estimates were done well before the fuel crisis.
Yeah.
So, that's a rollout for us for about $3 million, but ongoing and just in our more populated towns around East Gippsland on an ongoing basis, we're looking at 1.4. So that's a lot.
It
So,
is.
we have definitely, come together as a group, I guess, with those 34 other councils to really speak to that.
I guess in an election year, anything's possible. So keep up the fight, I'd say. Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Chris. Yeah.
I also want to talk to you about pools. We've been following the issue down in Moyne with the pool in Port Fairy. You've got a similar issue with the Bairnsdale outdoor pool being beyond its serviceable life and can't reopen without significant investment. These are tough decisions, aren't they, when communities are so attached to these facilities, but you've got to make some realistic decisions.
They are really tough decisions, Chris. And, we've got a community that's passionate about the pool, and we absolutely understand that. But this pool is 60 years old. And like you said, we are not the only ones faced with these challenges around pools in Victoria and probably around Australia.
Yeah.
So, we are undertaking a aquatic strategy at the moment, just to see where that lands in terms of, reaching out to community, make sure we're doing that community engagement piece with the whole of the East Gippsland Shire. And we'll see what comes from that. That's due to come back to us by the end of the year.
Right.
So we hope that we'll be in a better space then to, take all that information on board and consider it, and then decide what we do moving forward in the best interests of community for the whole of East Gippsland.
Yeah, so no decision yet, but I imagine you're being lobbied pretty strongly by parts of the community on that issue.
Yes, we are. And look, I come from lots of different backgrounds, but one of those backgrounds is as a swimming teacher.
Right.
And, councillors, myself as a swimming teacher, passionate about the water. We spend a lot of time on the water. We have beaches, we have rivers, we have lakes. So we're very conscious of all those things. So we will see what happens in that space, I'm sure. Yeah.
Given all those issues we've talked about, and there's so much more that challenges a diverse and spread out shire like yours, what gives you confidence and positivity about the future of East Gippsland?
So for me, it's about our resilient communities. So, we've been through some tough times. We've had floods, fires, droughts, but, when community get together and they connect, we are really stronger in that space. So, that's what it's about for me.
Nicely said. Well, all the best for the rest of your mayoralty. Is this a role you see yourself doing again in the future? Are you here for the long term in local government, do you think?
I think I am. I think I've become a bit of a tragic, much like yourself and Tony, who I've met. And I think we had a really long and interesting and good conversation. So I think it's just that, when you find your passion, or you find your tribe of people that all really love being in that space. And it's all about, helping your community, but it's also about future generations and what you're leaving behind. If you can make a small difference to, the place that you live in and the community that are happy to be in, then I'm hoping to be around for a little while.
Excellent. Nicely said, and all power to you as you work to make a difference, as you say. It's been lovely to have you on the show, and great to know that you're a long-term viewer, listener to VLGA Connect. I hope it's not the last time we have you on the program, Jodie.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Chris. Much appreciated, and great to finally meet you.
And likewise, that's the Mayor of East Gippsland Shire Council, Councillor Jodie Ashworth. Now, before we leave you this week, the VLGA and LGIU are hosting an online global live panel on Thursday, the 25th of June from 5:30 p.m. Australian time. The panel will focus on public sector productivity and growth with the impact of AI on local service delivery. We'll have leaders from around the world exploring how artificial intelligence can be used to streamline operations and reduce costs without eroding relationships, trust and community care. They'll address the transparency risk, the impact of AI on the council role and human resources, as well as the financial and governance implications. A free webinar for VLGA members. You can register at the VLGA website. Hope to have you with us for that event on the 25th of June. And that's all we have for you this week on VLGA Connect. Thanks to our sponsors, Hunt & Hunt Lawyers, and thanks to you for watching and listening. We'll see you again next week. Until then, bye for now.